Right, in this chapter we're going to have a look at the external environment and see what sort of impact that might have on our organisation. And the first model we have to look at here is something called the Pastel Model. And the Pastel Model is designed to help us look at the whole environment, hence the general environment. And all it is a little mnemonic that gives us 6 headings, so we've got things to look for, because the problem with doing an environmental analysis is spotting everything that's important. It's very, very easy to miss things because so much is going on in the wider environment. And so the 6 letters of Pastel stand for P, political. So is there anything the government is doing, any political factors going on that might affect our organisation? And what's important in the exam, because the examiner will tell you in the question the political factors, but is you identify them and explain the impact they're going to have on our particular organisation. The same with economic. What sort of economic factors are there out there? Is the economy growing, shrinking? What's happening to exchange rates and so on? That will also have an impact on the business, but again, it won't have the same impact on all companies. So what impact do you think that's having on our organisation? By the way, don't learn these examples I've put here, because as I say, the examiner will give you his own examples in the question that he sets. The S stands for social and demographic factors. So people living longer or living in different parts of the country, or are they living on their own longer, all those sort of factors. Does any of that have an impact on our business? The T stands for technology and technological developments. So is that going to have any impact on the business? And one immediately thinks here of the internet and e-business and so on, which we'll see later on in the notes. What sort of impact might that have? The second E, and it doesn't matter which way around you get these, is for environmental. And so the natural environment, global warming, greenhouse gases, all of that sort of stuff, much of which has been talked about recently in the newspapers and so on. And then the last one, the L, is for legal and regulatory. So are there laws, are there regulations that we have to follow? And of course the laws are set by politicians, so that rather nicely brings us back up to where we started, the political side. So this is, if you like, just a whole cycle of different factors that need to be considered when we're looking at what's going on in the outside world. And I say in the question you get, the examiner will give you quite a lot of information, half a side of information for section B questions, 2 to 3 sides for section A questions, and all of this information will be hidden in there and you go through and find it. But I say the important thing is you explain what impact this is going to have on the particular organisation you're looking at. So the Pastel model is a good one for looking at the general environment. If we then go over the page, we look at specific countries, and here a theorist called Professor Michael Porter, who's a professor at the Harvard Business School in America, he looked at different industries around the world and looked at where they started. And he noticed something quite interesting. You might imagine that you get a reasonably even spread of industries across the developed world. So across North America, Europe, the Far East and so on might all have a large number of international companies that started in those countries. And they do, but what is interesting is you get these clusters. So a particular industry, say the entertainment industry, all the internationally successful entertainment companies pretty much started life in America, in North America, in the USA. Financial organisations, a lot of them started, not all of them, but a lot of them started in the UK. Engineering companies, Germany. Electronics companies, Japan. So you get these clusters. And Porter was interested to identify, why do you get these clusters? It must be because certain countries, certain nations have an advantage in certain industries, hence the competitive advantage of nations. The diagram given is in the shape of a diamond, so this is also referred to as Porter's diamond. And the diagram shows us that there are 4 interrelated factors that help explain why you get these clusters. And we've got, first of all, what Porter described as factor conditions. These are the basic building blocks, so things like, if it's needed for your industry, raw materials or your labour and all that sort of stuff. Now, Porter made a distinction here between basic factors, which is things like just the number of people we can employ and that sort of stuff. And advanced factors, which looked at, for example, how accessible the raw materials were, or how skilled the staff were, and so on. So he makes a distinction between what he describes as basic factors and advanced factors. We then have the related and supporting industries, and we're not going to be successful if those companies we depend upon, those companies that supply us, aren't very good. So it's important that the related and supporting industries are very good at what they do. We've then got the demand conditions, and this is the one that often surprises people to start with. What Porter identified is that it's important that you start in a very demanding market, so where there's lots of competition, where your customers are never happy, they're always pushing you and so on. The idea here being that if we grow up in a tough environment, it'll make us much tougher, it'll make it much easier for us to compete on the world stage when we get to that level. So the more demanding, the tougher the neighbourhood when you're growing up, the more successful you'll be. And if you want an analogy for this, if you look at where all the successful boxers come from, they all seem to grow up in rather more deprived neighbourhoods where it's a very physically tough environment, and it makes them very, very tough, very strong. And then last of all, we've got the strategy, structure and rivalry, and this is looking at how businesses are operated in particular countries. So, for example, the Germans like very top-down, very formalised organisational structures, whereas the Italians like small family businesses and so on. And it may well be that those different approaches to business suit some industries more than others. Now, if you look at these four different areas, some countries may have some of them, some countries may have all of them, some countries may not have any of them at all. So how does this work from us advising an organisation's point of view? Well, obviously we need to look at the diamond conditions, and if they are all there in the country in which we exist, then that would be a good country for us to start off. If they're not there in our home country, then we may need to look for other countries and find where they do exist and move our business to that geographical area. But there is one other point that's worth bearing in mind, and I've put this after the explanation of those four different points, which is that the government has an important role here, because we can't, as a company, necessarily change the different conditions identified by Porter. But it is in the interests of government to create the right conditions, because then they will have successful businesses starting in their home patch. So those companies, that's where their headquarters, their head office will be, that's where the profits will be returned to as they become global businesses and so on. So it is good news for governments to create the right conditions in their home countries. The only problem, of course, is though governments get lots of these sort of requests and they won't necessarily have the resources to respond to all of them. But again, what we can do in a question is to have a look and see whether or not, if we're looking at investing in different countries, to see whether or not those countries have the appropriate conditions, and the country that has the most appropriate conditions would be the best place to start.